what's about to happen in space in the next 5-10 years is going to be mind blowing because of the cost of launch and the capacity for launch. That's cost of launch is going to come down.
In this episode, I'm joined by Philip Johnston, founder of LumenOrbit. He co-founded Opontia, raising 42 million to acquire and scale digital brands. And now he's building LumenOrbit, a startup launching megawatt scale data centers into space. With a degree from Harvard, Wharton, and Columbia, Philip has gone from trading billions using algorithms to engineering the future of AI compute beyond Earth. Hey, hi Philip. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks very much for having me.
Awesome. So you are building data centers in space. It would be great to hear in your words the problem you're tackling and why it's important right now.
Yes, for sure. So we are building very large data centers in space in order to be able to take advantage of the abundant energy through solar panels, the ability to radiatively cool, and the ability to scale almost indefinitely in space. So for you, or for maybe some of the listeners that know anything about us, we have this concept video out. You can see it on LumenOrbit.com, where we have this very large 4 by 4 kilometer solar panel and a radiator on there. That's basically the longer term vision, which is that almost all data centers will move to space once the launch cost gets below a certain point. So it is very important that the launch cost comes down. Yeah, that's what we're building.
Apart from the cost of launch going down, what are some of the current technical challenges while building this?
The main technical challenges are we need to build a very large, deployable, low cost, low mass radiator. So that's probably the biggest challenge in terms of the technicalities of what we're doing. Um, yeah.
And so you plan to run intensive AI compute, from what I gather. It's obviously very different from traditional satellites. What are some of the key differences in terms of the kind of tech needed for running these kind of compute workloads versus a traditional satellite?
Yeah, we'll be running about 100 times more powerful GPU compute than has ever been operated in space on our first demonstrator satellite. That's going up in a few months. Um, the main differences are in space, you don't have an atmosphere, and so you don't have either convection or conduction. And that means that the all of the cooling needs to happen through some kind of liquid or movable or somehow, and then through a radiator. And so the biggest challenges are number one, how do we keep these chips cool? And then number two, you have a challenge where you have radiation from the sun continuously hitting the satellite. And so what you need to do is have a certain amount of shielding. You need to fly in lower altitudes in order that you don't lose all of this compute to radiation.
And if everything goes to plan, how big can this be? Like, how much compute can you push to space?
All of Earth's compute is going to space. It's just a matter of the timeline. So when I say all of Earth's compute, I mean anything that requires less than a 20 millisecond latency might stay on Earth, but that's very few applications. Everything else is going to go to space. So all web hosting, pretty much, all AI training and inference, all database and servers and everything else is all going to be hosted in space.
So, on the latency front, do you think eventually services like yours working with, let's say, an ISP or an internet provider like Starlink could eliminate that bottleneck, or you think that still will be relevant for keeping things on Earth?
Well, the reason I say 20 milliseconds is because 20 milliseconds is the lowest latency you can get with Starlink right now. So you can't get lower than that using Starlink even.
Okay, got it. Got it.
So yeah, if you what I mean is if you need zero point 0.1 millisecond latency, like you need it to be in the same building, then that's the applications where you might have data centers terrestrially, or you might have compute terrestrially, but everything else is going to be in space.
What's the progress so far at Lumen, and when do you see something going live as a first iteration in space?
So we started about a year ago. We've designed and built the first satellite. It's going to be launched on a Falcon 9 from SpaceX in a few months. And May to July is the launch window. So that's going up mid this year. That's going to have 100 times more powerful GPU compute than has ever been operated in space before. And the purpose is to prove out our thermal management and shielding technologies. Then on the second satellite, we'll be launching in mid 2026. We've got a second launch booked. That's going to have about 100 times more powerful again, so about 10,000 times the current state of the art. And that will be the first commercial offering providing edge compute services for other satellites.
Quite soon, even from space standards. I think that's pretty quick. I came across a post from another founder. He was joking about how consulting or working at McKinsey specifically didn't prepare him for entrepreneurship. In your case, McKinsey was actually the place where you got exposed to the space, probably. How the consulting experience impacted your journey?
I presume that's Albert Mao. Is he a YC founder from this summer? Is it
Yeah,
that guy?
probably. Yeah.
Yeah, I know the guy. Um, he did work at McKinsey, so he can't say that it's completely useless. Yeah, broadly speaking, it's much better to have a technical background than a business or consulting background.
Yeah.
I would very much echo and agree with that sentiment. I would say, yeah, the ways it's moderately helpful is it's useful to be able to present and put together a PowerPoint and build a financial model and like general like business stuff. I guess is useful.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd say that's the main way.
Your last startup was in e-commerce, and now this is in space. The last being Opontia. In terms of entrepreneurial skills, how transferable were those skills moving to such a radically different industry?
The only real similarity between Apontia and what I'm doing now is that they both required quite a lot of capital.
Mhm.
Apontia because we were buying businesses, and Lumen because we are investing heavily in R&D. And so, in order to raise that amount of capital, you basically permanently, not permanently, but semi-permanently need to be fundraising.
Mhm.
So I've definitely learned a bit about how to pitch and how to prepare for a fundraise. So that was probably the main transferable skill I guess I got from the Apontia days.
Both these startups require a lot of capital. Are there any lessons from there on fundraising that you want to share around competitive fundraising environments? There's a lot of tailwind on investments in AI with all the programs being announced by the US government and the startups getting funded. How much of that was an impact, and are there any other fundraising lessons from both of these experiences?
Definitely the tailwinds. We're at the intersection of three megatrends, which is very helpful for fundraising. The first megatrend is demand for compute from AI.
Mhm.
The second megatrend is demand for power to fuel this compute. And the third megatrend is the cost of launch dramatically falling. So those three megatrends combining are very helpful for fundraising for what we're doing. In terms of lessons from Apontia had we raised in 2021 where it was the peak of the fervor. We raised a bit more early 2022, and then we tried to raise in 2023 and had a very tough fundraise. And it's the lesson there, I think, is you're pretty beholden to the like where the Nasdaq is, which is like regardless of how the business is doing, where the Nasdaq is. Like if the Nasdaq in the last 3 months was down 30%, the chance you can raise any round is very low
Hmm.
for even for AI or anything. Um, you, which I didn't realize how correlated it would be with VC, but it turns out it's pretty correlated.
And that's probably because they are looking at the markets and being a little cautious.
Like all of their stock portfolios will be down. They will have had big losses on some of them. For example, if you hold Nvidia today when it's down 15%, you're probably a little bit cautious about your next investment. And that holds true for all investors. And if the Nasdaq's down 30%, that means individual stocks in the Nasdaq are going to be down 70%.
Hmm.
Some of them,
Yeah.
and some people will be holding those, and so they get very nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say the learning is like we've taken a lot more capital now after the even after this 11 million, we took more. The sort of learning is make sure you're capitalized enough to get through the cycles. Otherwise, if you have to fundraise in a bad market, right now, in my opinion, is pretty much the best market you could possibly raise in because the Nasdaq's an all-time high, um, and there's just huge optimism in all things AI. So we need to basically make sure we have enough cash to get through the next two launches and through the next cycles. Yeah.
Opontia, you were not only fundraising for the company, but you were also acquiring digital brands. From an acquisition point of view, one aspect of scaling a business is through acquisitions, and a lot of entrepreneurs don't have experience in acquiring companies, whereas you've done quite a bit of it. Any recommendations on how to think about acquisitions and how to go about them?
Most early stage entrepreneurs should not be thinking about acquisitions at all. Probably for the first 4 or 5 years for the business, you should not be considering acquisitions. Um, yeah, it's just a huge distraction, massive waste of time. You have like problems integrating the new businesses. It makes sense for somebody like Ripple to make acquisitions where they already have this big platform to bolt stuff onto. But for the first few years, you should just be building product, like getting your own product to product market fit,
Mhm.
uh, and then scaling if you have product market fit, and then worry about acquisitions. Yeah, a bit further down the line, I'd say.
Yeah, but once you're ready, once you've spent a few years, scaled the business, and you start thinking about acquisitions, what are some of the things that founders who've never done that should watch out for?
Really depends on the business. Um, like it depends if you're somebody and you're buying WhatsApp, which does has zero revenue and 20 employees, and you're going to pay $18 billion for it. I can't tell you that you need to watch out for your cash conversion cycle because like it doesn't make the slightest difference. They don't have a cash conversion cycle. Whereas if you're buying an e-commerce brand,
Yep.
then that is the number one thing you need to watch out for is the cash conversion cycle. Like what are the payment terms to your suppliers? These types of things. Yeah, it's impossible to give like advice
And
on
generic advice
general.
on this, yeah. I would say someone with a non-finance background who's thinking of, who also has to deal with the finance side as an entrepreneur. What are some of the things you would recommend in terms of reading, if any?
Don't worry about it. Like just be stuck in the business, like stuck in the tech side of things.
Hmm.
You don't need to worry about the. Make sure you don't run out of money, but you're not probably going to run out of money in the first. For the first 2 years, people overcomplicate finance way too much. Just make sure you don't run out of money. It's like really not that difficult. Make sure you have enough runway in the cash in the bank that you're. If you have 18 months runway, most of the time you're like good. But people always way overcomplicate finance.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I know people who the first hire they hire is a CFO. You
Yep.
really don't need a CFO right now. You're good.
And so,
Yeah.
what made you transition from Apontia or e-commerce to space?
So Apontia came to SAT. A Turkish competitor bought that. I'm interested in space in general
Hmm.
because it's what's about to happen in space in the next 5-10 years is going to be mind blowing because of the cost of launch and the capacity for launch. That's cost of launch is going to come down maybe 100x, and the capacity of launch is going to come up by maybe 100,000x. All of these things combining make space an incredibly good place to look for opportunities. Not just what we're doing, there's many opportunities in space with low cost launch. Yeah, space is a good place right now because of low cost launch. It's not because of anything else. Space is fun and cool, but I wouldn't just do this business because it's fun and cool. I would only do this business because there is something that's about to change radically that's going to make space much more viable,
Right.
and that is about to happen.
When did you start noticing that, and what was the like trigger for you to take the leap?
I've been watching space YouTube influencers since 2020, 2021, basically since the start of the Starship development program. Then at McKinsey, I was working with some space agencies, with the UAE and Saudi space agencies. Started to notice it a bit then. And then in 2023, I went down to Starbase, Texas, where they're building the Starship program, even before the first launch, just to have a look around. And yeah, my mind was blown away by the scale of what they're building. Building is basically a gigafactory for it's like a Tesla production line for starships. So they're going to be producing in 18 months, they say 3 starships a week, and in 36 months, they say 3 starships a day. And that is just for comparison. The shuttle took a year to build and then a year to refurbish each shuttle.
Wow.
And they're building 3 starships a day, and each one can fly up to 3 times a day.
Wow. Yeah, that is massive.
And the payload capacity is about 100 tons, which is way bigger than the shuttle.
Hmm. Interesting.
Or even compared to Falcon 9, it's about yeah, 1,000 times more capacity. That's because it can refly so frequently.
And so, with this happening, what are some of the other areas you see? Like, what are some of the other moonshots you think might happen?
By the way, I don't classify this as a moonshot. We are an engineering challenge, which is extremely solvable. There is nothing. A moonshot to me is nuclear fusion or quantum computing,
Hmm.
where you don't know if where the answer is not clear if the outcome is yes. With what we're doing,
You
so
think?
long as the launch cost comes down, all data centers are going to space. That's a fact that's going to happen. To the extent that you don't believe the launch cost is going to come down, then we're a moonshot. But I think people are starting to come around to the idea the launch cost is rapidly about to come down a lot.
Okay.
But some other space-based interesting ideas. One is asteroid mining. That's going to be a huge business. Another one is space hotels. Another one is manufacturing in space. Another one is comms. Like Starlink is going to be the most cash generative product in history within 5 to 10 years. Yeah.
Manufacturing in space. What kind of manufacturing do you see?
The first ones are things where microgravity is helpful. So Varda Space, which is the biggest space manufacturing company, is doing pharmaceuticals. There are certain types of crystals that you want to grow in space because with microgravity they can be purer. Over time, all heavy industry will move to space. So you'll mine raw materials on asteroids, you'll manufacture in space, and then you'll ship back. You'll re-enter raw products.
Wow, crazy times ahead. Indeed.
It is good.
It's time for a rapid fire round. Toughest lesson so far from your entrepreneurial journey?
Don't run out of money.
Ain't that the truth? Yeah. Money is definitely important. If you could solve one problem you're facing instantly, what would that be?
Hiring. We need to hire the world's best engineers in the next month.
Hiring. Hiring is definitely,
We've got some kick-ass people, but we need more.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. And where can people find open roles just so that they're
.com.
lumenorbit.com? What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
There's a few quotes I quite like. I like Charlie Munger, who quotes somebody else, but I don't know who it is. He says something along the lines of, "Never underestimate the man who overestimates himself." I quite like that advice. He also has a business quote, which is something along the lines of, "There are two problems in business: not enough sales and everything else." Which is basically saying if you don't have product market fit, you're fucked.
Yeah. One book that inspired you?
Elon Musk's biography by
Isaacson.
Isaacman.
Yeah. I think it's right here. Isaacson. Yeah.
Isaacson. Sorry.
Thanks for taking the time, and I really enjoyed the conversation, and I wish you guys all the best.
Thanks so much.
All right. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast app is. See you in the next episode.